break down my dialectical story. Proletariat, bourgeoisie, them versus us, you versus me, slave, master, lord and serf, new class battles, same old turf.
Marx sees history as a series of class struggles, and particularly relevant for this time period now is between the bourgeoisie or the capitalists and the proletariat and the workers, and he sees their interests as being opposed.
He's someone who sees groups as the operative mechanism of human exchange, human interaction. And he sees these groups as almost scientifically derived. So his big divide in society is between the proletariat and the bourgeois. These are basically different groups of economic class in society, and he sees the groups themselves as having differences of interest, differences of aim. So if you're a worker, you're a proletariat, your aim is to better your conditions, to gain more from your labor, to improve your lot in life, effectively. Whereas the bourgeois, the owners of capital, at least by the time that Marx is writing, are seeking to profit. They're seeking enrichment. And so long as that divergence exists, so long as it persists, it's going to bring the two groups into struggle. And it's the struggle, it's the competition over the means of production that's basically the driving mechanism of Marx's entire system.
Marx borrowed from the classical economists like Adam Smith and David Ricardo, who analytically divided the economy into landowners, workers, and capitalists. And for Marx, these were sociological categories. So the workers were divided between the proletarians, the unskilled workers, and the bourgeoisie, the salary earners, and then the landowners and the capitalists. But the landowners had become less important by the time Marx wrote. The capitalists had displaced the feudal aristocracy, and the next stage would be the proletarians overthrowing the bourgeoisie and the capitalists and establishing a socialist society. Dictatorship is a negatively charged term, but Marx's view seemed to be that it's just changing one dictatorship for another. We now have the dictatorship of the capitalists. We're going to replace that by the dictatorship of the proletarians, who are the majority in his view. So it's a more majoritarian system.
There are owners and those who work for the owners. That's how you divide the classes, nothing else. And it's true that in the late 19th century, there was an element of that, but you're living in times really when there was a beginning of a breakdown of aristocracy, you know? So you had all over Europe, and even to some extent in the United States, the old-style stakeholders in society were losing power. They were giving way because of the rise of capitalism. Because capitalism was generating tremendous social upheavals. You know, you could make progress in your own lifetime, really, for the first. You weren't born into the class you were always going to be in. You know, so society got a lot more fluid with the rise of capitalism. You know, so the poor could become rich, and an immigrant could become a mogul. You know, in one generation, that was amazing. Marx's view of class might have been more plausible a century earlier, when the aristocracy was entrenched. You know, the landowning elite. You know, the bondholders and the bankers and the big shots. But that was less true in the time that Marx was writing. So he was really maybe better describing the world from 100 years previously. But that's why he wanted to treat it. And so anybody with any kind of ownership stake or accumulated property or any kind of decision rights over any complex economic unit is then just automatically branded an exploiter.
So it's this class conflict, the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And we can see this same mentality actually showing up in Occupy Wall Street protests, where it's the 1%, the 1%'s bad. They are getting rich at the expense of everybody else. So it's this very different view of the world. One is two classes clashing. They're against each other. Whereas I would argue the proper view of economics is we're all in it together and we're all working on the same team.
everybody's kind of working really hard, actually. It's not really, society's not really divided between workers and capitalists, or bourgeoisie and the proletariat.
When the capitalist engages with the workers and makes a trade and hires them, they're both becoming better off. He's got his classes that are opposed wrong. As long as it's people voluntarily interacting, their interests dovetail. Instead, the real class distinction should be those in power in government who can coerce you versus those who you have to deal with on a voluntary basis. And when we see the coercion, that's when you actually have a version of a class struggle.